The time is just gone 8:35 as we continue this morning, and the breaking story is the Zionist regime at dawn this morning attacking Iran, and we've already seen the response coming through from Iran. Sayyid Ali Khamenei obviously issuing a statement talking about the powerful hand of the armed forces of the Islamic Republic will not leave it alone, God willing. And in the enemy's attacks, a number of commanders and scientists were martyred. Now, all of this is taking place at a time when all eyes have been on the march to the Rafah crossing, where thousands will be converging into Egypt to march again and calling for the opening of the Rafah crossing. But we've seen this has happened now, and again, when one looks at the governments that have been involved, the United States of America, the UK providing support to the Israelis, and also we've seen airspace open up by Jordan, allowing Israel the freedom to use their airspace. We've seen the military bases in Qatar, the American military bases as well being used. So all of this put together, what does this actually mean? And this is breaking news. So we're going across now to be joined by journalist and researcher at Media Review Network, Mariam Jooma. Mariam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me again, Uncle Inayat.
Yes, clearly, Mariam. In fact, we knew that something was actually brewing in the last few days. We've seen Donald Trump talking about attacking Iran. We know Israel obviously has been itching. They've been aching to attack Iran for a very, very long time. And now we've seen this has happened. We've also seen the response come through from Iran and hundreds of drones actually into Israel as well. Let's just try and make some sense of this, Mariam.
Look, Uncle Inayat, very firstly, we have to say it's a clear violation. So not just a contravention, but an absolute violation of international law. Iran had not provoked an attack. It had not even presented any significant military rhetoric beforehand. So therefore, these strikes were just completely not even preventative or preemptive. It's just a complete violation of international law. Because we have to know that, of course, that's a signature of Israel is violating international law. That is the signature of their foreign policy. But again, just to be more specific, the UN Charter, Article 51, that says that self-defense under international law requires that you have to have an armed attack in order to respond. So this basically invalidates any kind of argument of self-defense, which is what Netanyahu has said, that Israel is, facing an existential threat from Iran. So very clearly, there's a sovereignty violation there. We've seen the response from Oman, Saudi Arabia, interestingly, Indonesia, and the UN have all condemned the strikes. Also very interesting is to look at the language of condemnation, where most of the Western countries have said they do understand that this was an attack from Israel, but that Iran should show restraint. A lot of Western statements have focused on the fact that Iran should not retaliate. However, the Japanese government, in their statement, said that they condemn the act completely from the Israeli side. So there was the use of the word condemn, which I find interesting. So we're seeing the tide is turning. What it means right now, though, is that Israel has been so emboldened that they could actually attack 5 of the major cities in Iran. So, I mean, you're talking about the capital city, as well as major areas of not just nuclear development site, but I mean, areas of industry and commerce, and of course, civilians being affected. So what does it actually mean? It means that, places like Natanz, which actually hold the nuclear sites, that there's a risk of very severe, very serious radioactive contamination. And this obviously, again, violates all kinds of treaties protecting civilian nuclear infrastructure. And so, again, we see, this absolute impunity coming from the side of Israel. Now, let's talk about the US, because the US and Iran have been negotiating, although it's been a bit fraught over a couple of weeks, on Iran's return back to the previous agreement on their nuclear development, with the contention being that they should not be allowed to enrich their uranium. So what, in my analysis, I see the US's role as, again, very complicit, but also it's using the opportunity. Donald Trump's using the opportunity to sit back and allow Netanyahu to take the heat. So while he's fully aware of what's been brewing, as you very rightly said at the beginning, there have been talk. There has been talk of an imminent strike on Iran. So there has definitely been knowledge of it. I mean, we know that nothing happens in Israel without the US's knowledge. But Trump, I think, is using this as an opportunity to finally cut the dog loose, in the sense of removing Netanyahu from Trump's own legacy. So whatever happens, the US will not, it won't necessarily soften its stance towards Israel, but it will create blameworthy characters. And Netanyahu indeed is a blameworthy character. So by removing themselves from the actual act of striking on Iran, the US is able to, play the innocent bystander almost. And this gives it leeway in terms of how it can fashion the next steps, particularly with regard to negotiations on Iran, but also in respect to Gaza.
Yes, but also, Mariam, I know there's a lot of history, and we've seen the statement come out of Iran where a number of commanders, a number of scientists have actually been killed. So we know exactly, what and who Israel is actually targeting. But also, there's a lot of history with regard to the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and perhaps we should just unpack some of that history.
Absolutely. This is quite a critical element, Uncle Inayat, because people assume that the IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, is actually the military, the formal military of Iran, but they are not actually. They are a parallel organization. So it was created in 1979 by Ayatollah Khomeini after the Islamic Revolution in a way to counter the strength and the influence of the Iranian military, which at that time was very much embedded with the old Shah regime. So it was a way of creating an internal kind of a protection force that would be designed as a people's army. That's what they call them, to the principles of the Velayat-e-Faqih, which is what Iran is based on in terms of its constitution. So the ordinary army is called the Artesh. And in my opinion, I think the dynamic between the IRGC and Artesh is something to look at, because they also are sponsored and patronized by different power centers. So the IRGC, I mean, it has personnel of over 190,000 personnel of troops, and it controls, the Navy, the aerospace, even Cyber Command. And it's essentially responsible for the axis of resistance. So if you're talking about a commander from the IRGC being taken out, I mean, literally the head, it raises all kinds of questions about, the stability of the security infrastructure or network within Iran. I tend to believe that there are definitely, weaknesses. If you look at how the Prime Minister, Ibrahim Raisi, former Prime Minister, was killed in the helicopter accident, it seemed to be such basic security measures that were not taken. And then, of course, we have the assassination of Ismail Haniyeh, and we have Hassan Nasrallah being taken out. So these are key, figures who should be untouchable, considering Iran's projection of strength. And so if we consider that this has happened, we need to look at what are the competing powers to the IRGC, and is it possible that there are members within the Iranian establishment who are actually, not necessarily working for its own government. And so we look at the role of Pezeshkian, who is the secular head, or, I guess there is no secular head, but constitutional head, as opposed to the theocratic head of Ali Khamenei. And we have to position these two leaders and understand what the power dynamics are between them. You will note that, Ibrahim Raisi was poised to create quite a different foreign policy for Iran. He was willing to work with Turkey, was willing to have, even joint military exercises with Turkey and other neighbors. Whereas, the position of Ali Khamenei is quite different. So essentially, my concern, or at least my focus, would be for the next couple of weeks is to look at who the main players are in the IRGC and Artesh and figure out whose patronage is linked to whom and to what extent is Israel basically exploiting the weaknesses within the Iranian regime itself.
Mariam, just looking at the other players that are involved, and we've seen that the British have actively supported Israel using Cyprus as a base as well. The Americans are there supporting as well. And again, just looking at Iran at this point in time in terms of capability, in terms of capacity to inflict any serious military damage to Israel, what are some of your thoughts? Because we know at this point in time, Iran is left with absolutely no choice but to respond to these attacks by Israel. And I see there is a message saying that the title is wrong. Israel strikes Iran and not the other way around. So we will correct that. We thank our listener for that. But again, the ability of Iran to respond, because at this point in time, we are seeing by the minute news actually coming out in terms of what is taking place in Israel as well. Israel telling settlers not to take pictures. Shops are full in Israel, people trying to buy large quantities of food. All of this is actually playing out. So the entire region at this point in time is on high alert.
Look, when it comes to military capacity, I don't think one can necessarily, make a definitive analysis of what their arsenal is like. But if we look at the responses that they've, made to Israel in the past, it has not necessarily been as forceful as I think the world expected. And indeed, the coordinated nature of the response, almost, giving Israel time when it came to the previous response to the bombing of the Syrian embassy, the Iranian embassy in Lebanon, sorry, it has been disappointing. But I think the emphasis here is not so much on the physical military, but to what extent is the political institution capable of functioning as a single unit. And this is again where I say the power dynamics within Iran is going to be very important. And look, I mean, its relations with its neighbors is also something to consider. With the most recent Pakistan-India conflict escalation that happened, Iran was very silent. I mean, it made no statement with regard to India's strikes on Pakistan. And it did not even offer any support to Pakistan either, publicly at least. So Iran has actually been isolated, especially with the decimation of the Assad regime in Syria. And this is where I think it will become quite critical for other players in the region to almost influence what happens now. And this is, I think, unfortunate in the sense that Israel is fully aware of it. So the sanctions have played a very, definitive role in terms of the crippling nature of the economy and the fact that they don't have access to parts and weapons manufacturing capacity because of the sanctions. But aside from that, I think it's the inability of Iran to be part of a regional force, which has isolated it from being flexible in its positions. So whereas you see the Gulf countries have, the oil and essentially their relationship with the U.S. as a backbone for them to flex their foreign policy, and Turkey has its increasing role in the Caucasus as well as its relationship with Russia and China behind it. Iran is, I think, quite isolated. And so we need to be, focused on what is the region going to do? And it is not clear at this point.
Yes, and also, Mariam, just finally, how much of this is a diversion from what is taking place in Gaza, and it's also taking time. It's taking place at a time where we have this march that is taking place. We've got this global action that is taking place against in Egypt and the march to Rafah, and we've seen right across the entire world the momentum has actually been gaining as far as Gaza is concerned and supporting Gaza. So So just to try and see if there is a connection between what is taking place in Gaza at this point in time, and also this march in Egypt and the attack on Iran by Israel. Also, at the same time, just trying to make absolute sense of Iran, that has been an active supporter of Hezbollah in Lebanon. It's been an active supporter of Hamas in Gaza. It's been supporting Ansarullah as well. And we know all these attacks that have been coming out of Yemen. So let's just try and unpack, what sort of link and connection there is with all of these issues that have been playing out, that have actually built up to this attack by Israel on Iran.
I'm glad you raised that, Uncle Inayat, because I think we've also forgotten the role of groups like those in Yemen, like the Houthis. They've actually played quite a critical role in, making sure that Israel is distracted to a certain extent on its northern border. And then, of course, the agreement between Hezbollah and Israel in terms of the agreement not to continue attacks was unfortunate, because that also kind of switched off the light of the resistance on the Lebanese side. But indeed, it's certainly a matter of diverting international attention on what's happening at the Rafah border. And I think the flotilla really did capture the imagination and indeed the media attention of the world. It's unfortunate that we've had previous flotillas that actually, had fatal consequences that did not receive as much coverage. But at this point, I think you right on the money. It's been a form of moving, deflecting away from what's actually happening. And the dynamic is that civil society, even within countries who are complicit, so you're looking at Egypt, look at how the government has cracked down on the activists from the Samud caravan. Civil society is not going to allow that for much longer. And I would suggest that perhaps we're looking at a rebirth of the Arab Spring, and that Gaza might actually be the pivotal issue to begin a transformation against the authoritarian regimes. As painful as it has been, as morbid and as sacrificial as it has been on the side of the Palestinians, perhaps we can look at that as a ray of light.
Well, Mariam, let's follow developments, and I'm sure you're going to be keeping a close eye on what actually transpires throughout the day and over the coming days as well. But Jazakallah, as always, it's an absolute pleasure having you with us, and please have yourself a wonderful Jummah as well. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam. Thank you for having me.
Mariam Jooma Çarikçi joining us once again this morning, unpacking the latest developments and the Israeli attack on Iran and the Iranian response. Next up, we've got Jummah Inspirations coming up.